Hey, Russell here from Adelaide West Physio and Pilates. I'm going to talk a little bit about people who are unlucky enough to be born without the ability to feel pain. And that might sound a bit odd because you might have had points in time where you've thought, it'd be great if I didn't feel any pain. People that are born with a condition called congenital analgesia actually don't do well in life on the whole, and I'll talk a little bit more about why that is. Congenital analgesia is also known as congenital insensitivity to pain, and that doesn't quite work. That title is wrong because it really should be congenital insensitivity to painful stimuli, not to pain. That might seem like nitpicking, but gee whiz, if you're a scientist in the area, if you're a neurologist or someone that's coming up with these things, you should get the name right. And maybe it's because when this term was proposed, it was before a time where people really understood how pain actually works, which is it's not a thing that comes into your body. That may well be a topic for another video. I've covered that on a few videos though, where we've talked about pain as being a brain or a body product, a body producing experience, rather than pain being something that you receive. Anyway, I digress. It's quite an interesting condition, and the problem with this is actually really dangerous because, and this goes some way to explain about what pain does too. I'll talk about the condition, then I'll bring it back to something that's quite relevant to everyone. So it's dangerous because we rely on our pain system to tell us when we need to do something to protect ourselves. And when that alarm system is faulty and it doesn't work, then it really leaves you wide open to injuring yourself, not surprisingly. It's a genetic disorder, so people are born with it. It's rare, but I wouldn't say it's super rare. They report 1 in every 25,000 births, which I was expecting it would be much. When they said it's a rare condition, I would have thought it would have been much less prevalent than that. But 1 in every 25,000. And there's a place in Sweden, in the north of Sweden, where there's a town, a village, where there seems to be a disproportionately high number of people that have congenital analgesia. And in a study in 2006, they were able to account for 43 people in that village that had the inability to feel pain, which is really interesting and make a good place to study the condition. They can sometimes feel temperature and sometimes not. So they can often still feel other sensations, but just not the sensation of pain. And this was a quote, I'll read this from a guy who had this condition, and he said he would love to know what pain means and what it feels like to be in pain. Like, he's actually looking for it. He didn't understand it because he'd never felt it. And the other comment that he made was, without it, your life is full of challenges, which is a really interesting comment. And this goes some way towards explaining why people die young. Like, it's quite unusual for people to reach adulthood if they're born with the inability to feel pain. They get cuts and bruises, they get broken bones, they get burns. Kids are often biting the end of their tongue off without realizing it. Foreign bodies in the eye are quite common and left untreated and become infected. And one of the things that surprised me, so infections are obviously a big problem for people that have injury that is left untreated, and burns. One of the interesting things I didn't realize that is why some of these, I assumed that most of the deaths would be related to untreated infection. But in actual fact, because pain is a really important part of helping us to work out what is safe to do and what's dangerous to do in the world. It helps to modulate our behaviours, and we learn from it. The people that are born without the ability to feel it often show self-destructive behaviours, and they take greater risks, they do dangerous things, who knows why, whether it's just, all right, but so they often die young as a result of doing these dangerous things. And that surprised, well, now that I think about it, it doesn't surprise me, but it's something that I hadn't heard before. And it makes sense, you know, if you're a teen, if you're a kid, you rely on pain to remind you, well, don't do that thing again, because that was a bit silly. Whereas if you don't get that feedback, then it opens up the world to doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So being born without pain is actually clearly dangerous to the person, to the organism, and that's because pain's there for a good reason. It's there as a protective mechanism. It signals when there's injury. That's not its main job. It's there to signal when you need protection. That's its main job. And so it's good to remember that. You might wish that there are times where you'd like your pain to go away, but it's actually dangerous not to have it. And to say that the pain system is accurate all the time is wrong, because it's not. And that's how you can have tumours grow to a size and kind of get away from you without knowing about it. So the pain system does, it's not completely reliable, but we assume that it is. I think that's the thing. We assume that our pain is always accurate, and what our pain is it's a result of calculation, weighing up, assessing the situation, drawing on all available data, not just in the tissues, but available data about, what you believe about the problem and past experiences and things like that in order to come up with a calculation of the degree of danger. And that calculation can be exaggerated in situations where there's persistent pain, like the system goes into super protection mode. And quite a nice parallel is you think about what can happen with your visual system. We assume that our visual system, that what we see is correct. And yet we know that there are visual illusions where we're capable of tricking our visual system. And so in a similar way to the way that we assume that our visual system is always right, but it can be tricked, we assume that our pain system is right, but it doesn't always work accurately. And this is how persistent pain happens, where our protection system just goes off on a bit of a, not a tangent, but it becomes super sensitive. It becomes sensitive to things that perhaps it doesn't need to be sensitive to, or the response is exaggerated to things that shouldn't be painful or should hurt a certain amount. So the story of congenital analgesia for me is a really interesting one, because it just shows how important pain is. It's a primary protector of us. It's a priority signal to do something differently, to protect, to act. And when it's not there as a protector, then it really leaves us wide open to injury, to infection, to death, things leading up to death. And we rely on it. It's important, but it's not always accurate. I hope that makes sense. If there's anything in that doesn't make sense, if you feel like I might be talking bollocks, if you think I might be extrapolating things, if you want to ask a question, pop it in the comments below. Be more than happy to answer your questions, and if required, we can cut another video and explain a part of that in a little bit more depth if that